Part 2 of A Spaceship Named McGuire by Randall Garrett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2. Mr. Oak, he began, I have two problems. One is minor, the other major. But I have attempted to blow the minor problem up out of proportion so that all the people here at Raven's Rest think that is the only problem. They think that I brought you out here for that reason alone. But all that is merely cover-up for the real problem. Which is? I prompted. He leaned forward again. Apparently it was the only exercise he ever got. You're aware that Viking Spacecraft is one of the corporations under the management of Ravenhurst Holdings? I nodded. Viking Spacecraft built some of the biggest and best spacecraft in the system. It held most of Ceres, all of it in fact, except the government reservation. It had moved out to the asteroids a long time back after the big mining concerns began cutting up the smaller asteroids for metal. The raw materials are easier to come by out here than they are on Earth, and it's a devil of a lot easier to build a spacecraft under low-G conditions than it is under the pull of Earth or Luna or Mars. Do you know anything about the experimental robotic ships being built on Eros? Ravenhurst asked. Not much, I admitted. I have heard about them, but I don't know any of the details. That wasn't quite true, but I found it doesn't pay to tell everybody everything you know. The engineering details aren't necessary, Ravenhurst said. Besides, I don't know them myself. The point is that Viking is trying to build a ship that will be as easy to operate as a flitterboat, a one-man cargo vessel. Perhaps even a completely automatic job for cargo, and just use a one-man crew for the passenger vessels. Imagine how that would cut the cost of transportation in the solar system. Imagine how it would open up the high-speed cargo transfer if an automatic vessel could accelerate at 20 or 25 Gs to turnover. I'll give Ravenhurst this. He had a light in his eyes that showed a real excitement about the prospect he was discussing, and it wasn't due entirely to the money he might make. Sounds fine, I said. What seems to be the trouble? His face darkened half a shade. The company police suspect sabotage, Mr. Oak. How? What kind? They don't know. Viking has built 6 ships of that type, the McGuire class, the engineers call it. Each one has been slightly different than the one before, of course, as they ironed out the bugs in their operation, but each one has been a failure. Not one of them would pass the test for spaceworthiness. Not a failure of the drive or the ordinary mechanisms of the ship, I take it? Ravenhurst sniffed. Of course not. The brain. The ships become, as you might say, non compos mentis. As a matter of fact, when the last one simply tried to burrow into the surface of Eros by reversing its drive, one of the roboticists said that a coroner's jury would have returned a verdict of suicide while of unsound mind if there were inquests held for spaceships. That doesn't make much sense, I said. No, it doesn't. It isn't sensible. Those ships' brains shouldn't have behaved that way. Robot brains don't go mad unless they're given instructions to do so. Conflicting orders, erroneous information, that sort of thing. Or unless they have actual physical defects in the brains themselves. The brains can handle the job of flying a ship all right, though? I asked. I mean, they have the capacity for it? Certainly. They're the same type that's used to control the automobile traffic on the eastern seaboard highway network of North America. If they can control the movements of millions of cars, there's no reason why they can't control a spaceship. No, I said, I suppose not. I thought it over for a second and asked, but what do your robotics men say is causing the malfunctions? That's where the problem comes in, Mr. Oak. He pursed his pudgy lips and his eyes narrowed. The opinions are divided. Some of the men say it's simply a case of engineering failure, that the bugs haven't been worked out of this new combination, but that as soon as they are, everything will work as smoothly as butter. Others say that only deliberate tampering could cause those failures. And still others say there's not enough evidence to prove either of those theories is correct. But your opinion is that it's sabotage. Exactly, said Ravenhurst. And I know who is doing it and why. I didn't try to conceal the little bit of surprise that gave me. You know the man who's responsible? He shook his head rapidly, making his jowls wobble. I didn't mean that. It's not a single man. It's a group. Maybe you'd better go into a little more detail on that, Mr. Ravenhurst. He nodded, and this time his jowls bobbled instead of wobbled. Some group at Viking is trying to run me out of the managerial business. They want Viking to be managed by Thurston Enterprises. They evidently think they can get a better deal from him than they can from me. If the McGuire project fails, they'll have a good chance of convincing the stockholders that the fault lies with Ravenhurst. You follow? So far, I said. Do you think Thurston's behind this, then? I don't know, he said slowly. He might be, or he might not. If he is, that's perfectly legitimate business tactics. He's got a perfect right to try to get more business for himself if he wants to. I've undercut him a couple of times. But I don't think he's too deeply involved, if he's involved at all. This smacks of a personal attack against me, and I don't think that's Thurston's type of play. You see, things are a little touchy right now. I won't go into details, but you know what the political situation is at the moment. It works this way. As far as Viking is concerned, if I lose the managerial contract at Viking, a couple of my other contracts will go by the board too, especially if it's proved that I've been lax in management or have been expending credit needlessly. These other two companies are actually a little shaky at the moment. I've only been managing them for a little over a year in one case and 2 years in the other. Their assets have come up since I took over, but they'd still dump me if they thought I was reckless. How can they do that? I asked. You have a contract, don't you? Certainly. They wouldn't break it, but they'd likely ask the government inspectors to step in and check every step of the managerial work. Now, you and I and everybody else knows that you have to cut corners to make a business successful. If the GIs step in, that will have to stop, which means we'll show a loss heavy enough to put us out. We'll be forced to sell the contract for a pittance. Well then, if Viking goes and these other two corporations go, it'll begin to look as if Ravenhurst can't take care of himself and his companies anymore. Others will climb on the bandwagon. Contracts that are coming up for renewal will be reconsidered instead of continuing automatically. I think you can see where that would lead eventually. I did. You don't go into the managing business these days unless you have plenty on the ball. You've got to know all the principles and all the tricks of organization and communication, and you've got to be able to waltz your way around all the roadblocks that are caused by government laws, some of which have been floating around on the books of one nation or another for 2 or 3 centuries. Did you know that there's a law on the American statute books that forbids the landing of a spaceship within 100 miles of a city? That was passed back when they were using rockets, but it's never been repealed. Technically, then, it's almost impossible to land a ship anywhere on the North American continent. Long Island Spaceport is openly flouting the law, if you want to look at it that way. A managerial combine has to know all those little things and know how to get around them. It has to be able to have the confidence of the stockholders of a corporation if it's run on the Western plan, or the confidence of communal owners if it's run on the Eastern plan. Something like this could snowball on Ravenhurst. It isn't only the rats that desert a sinking ship. So does anyone else who has any sense. What I want to know, Mr. Oak, Ravenhurst continued, is who is behind this plot, whether an individual or a group. I want to know identity and motivation. Is that all? I eyed him skeptically. No, of course not. I want you to make sure that the MGYR-7 isn't sabotaged. I want you to make sure it's protected from whatever kind of monkey wrenches are being thrown into its works. It's nearly ready for testing now, isn't it? I asked. It is ready. It seems to be in perfect condition so far. Viking is already looking for a test pilot. It's still in working order now, and I want to be certain that it will remain so." I cocked my head to one side and gave him my interrogative and suspicious glance, number 9 in the manual. "You didn't do any checking on the first 6 McGuire ships. You wait until this one is done before calling me. Why the delay, Ravenhurst?" It didn't faze him. "I became suspicious after McGuire's 6 failed. I put Colonel Brock on it." I nodded. I'd had dealings with Brock. He was head of Ravenhurst's security guard. "Brock didn't get anywhere," I said. "He did not. His own face is too well known for him to have investigated personally, and he's not enough of an actor to get away with using a plexiskin mask. He had to use underlings, and I'm afraid some of them might be in the pay of the, opposition. They got nowhere. In other words, you may have spies in your own organization who are working with the Viking group." "Very interesting. That means they know I'm working for you, which will effectively seal me up too. You might as well have kept Brock on the job." He smiled in a smug, superior sort of way that some men might have resented. I did. Even though I'd fed him the line so that he could feel superior, knowing that a smart operator like Ravenhurst would already have covered his tracks. I couldn't help wishing I'd told him simply to trot out his cover story instead of letting him think I believed it had never occurred to either of us before. "As far as my staff knows, Mr. Oak, you are here to escort my daughter, Jacqueline, to Bronzeville, Luna. You will naturally have to take her to Ceres in your flitterboat, where you will wait for a specially chartered ship to take you both to Luna. That will be a week after you arrive. Since the McGuire 7 is to be tested within 3 days, that should give you ample time. If it doesn't, we will consider that possibility if and when it becomes probable. I have a great deal of faith in you." "Thanks. One more thing. Why do you think anybody will swallow the idea that your daughter needs a private bodyguard to escort her to Bronzeville?" His smile broadened a little. "You have not met my daughter, Mr. Oak. Jacqueline takes after me in a great many respects, not the least of which is her desire to have things her own way and submit to no man's yoke, as the saying goes. I have had a difficult time with her, sir. A difficult time. It is and has been a matter of steering a narrow course between the Scylla of breaking her spirit with too much discipline and the Charybdis of allowing her to ruin her life by letting her go hog wild. She is 17 now, and the time has come to send her to a school where she will receive an education suitable to her potentialities and abilities, and discipline which will be suitable to her spirit. Your job, Mr. Oak, will be to make sure she gets there. You are not a bodyguard in the sense that you must protect her from the people around her. Quite the contrary. They may need protection from her. You are to make sure she arrives in Bronzeville on schedule. She is perfectly capable of taking it in her head to go scooting off to Earth if you turn your back on her." Still smiling, he refilled his glass. "Do have some more Madeira, Mr. Oak. It's really an excellent year." I let him refill my glass. "That, I think, will cover your real activities well enough. My daughter will, of course, take a tour of the plant on Ceres, which will allow you to do whatever work is necessary." He smiled at me. I didn't smile back. "Up until now, this sounded like a pretty nice assignment," I said. "But I don't want it now. I can't take care of a teenage girl with a desire for the bright lights of Earth while I investigate a sabotage case." I knew he had an out. I was just prodding him into springing it. He did. "Of course not. My daughter is not as scatterbrained as I have painted her. She is going to help you." "Help me?" "Exactly. You are ostensibly her bodyguard. If she turns up missing, you will, of course, leave no stone unturned to find her." He chuckled. "And Ceres is a fairly large stone." I thought it over. I still didn't like it too well, But if Jacqueline wasn't going to be too much trouble to take care of, it might work out. And if she did get to be too much trouble, I could see to it that she was unofficially detained for a while. "All right, Mr. Ravenhurst," I said. "You've got yourself a man for both jobs." "Both?" "I find out who is trying to sabotage the McGuire ship, and I babysit for you. That's 2 jobs, and you're going to pay for both of them." "I expected to," said Shalimar Ravenhurst. 15 minutes later, I was walking into the room where I'd left my vac suit. There was a girl waiting for me. She was already dressed in her vac suit, so there was no way to be sure, but she looked as if she had a nice figure underneath her suit. Her face was rather unexceptionally pretty, a sort of nice girl next door face. Her hair was a reddish brown and cut fairly close to the skull. Only a woman who never intends to be in a vac suit in free fall can afford to let her hair grow. "Miss Ravenhurst?" I asked. She grinned and stuck out a hand. "Just call me Jack and I'll call you Dan, okay?" I grinned and shook her hand because there wasn't much else I could do. Now I'd met the Ravenhursts, a father called Shalimar and a daughter called Jack, and a spaceship named McGuire. I gave the flitterboat all the push it would take to get us to Ceres as fast as possible. I don't like riding in the things. You sit there inside a transite hull which has 2 bucket seats inside it, fore and aft, astraddle the drive tube, and you guide from one beacon to the next while you keep tabs on orbital positions by radio. It's a long jump from one rock to the next, even in the asteroid belt, and you have to live inside your vac suit until you come to a stopping place where you can spend an hour or so resting before you go on. It's like driving cross-continent in an automobile, except that the signposts and landmarks are constantly shifting position. An inexperienced man can get lost easily in the belt. I was happy to find that Jack Ravenhurst knew how to handle a flitterboat and could sight navigate by the stars. That meant that I could sleep while she piloted and vice versa. The trip back was a lot easier and faster than the trip out had been. I was glad, in a way, that Ceres was within flitterboat range of Raven's Rest. I don't like the time wasted in waiting for a regular spaceship, which you have to do when your target is a quarter of the way around the belt from you. The cross-system jumps don't take long, but getting to a ship takes time. The Ravenhurst girl wasn't much of a talker while we were en route. A little general chit-chat once in a while, then she'd clam up to do a little mental orbit figuring. I didn't mind. I was in no mood to pump her just yet, and I was usually figuring orbits myself. You get in the habit after a while. When the Ceres' beacon came into view, I was snoozing. Jack reached forward and shook my shoulder. "Decelerating toward Ceres," she said. "Want to take over from here on?" Her voice sounded tinny and tired in the earphones of my fishbowl. "Okay, I'll take her in. Have you called Ceres Field yet?" "Not yet. I figured that you'd better do that since it's your flitterboat." I said okay and called Ceres. They gave me a traffic orbit and I followed it into Ceres Field. It was a lot bigger than the postage stamp field on Raven's Rest and more brightly lit and a lot busier, but it was basically the same idea. A broad, wide, smooth area that had been carved out of the surface of the nickel iron with a focused sunbeam. One end of it was reserved for flitterboats. 3 big spaceships sat on the other end, looking very noblesse oblige at the little flitterboats. I clamped down, gave the key to one of the men behind the desk after we had gone below, and turned to Jack. "I suggest we go to the hotel first and get a shower and a little rest. We can go out to the Viking tomorrow." She glanced at her watch. Like every other watch and clock in the belt, it was set for Greenwich Standard Time. What's the point in having time zones in space? "I'm not tired," she said brightly. "I got plenty of sleep while we were on the way. Why don't we go out tonight? They've got a bounce dance place called Bolly's that—" I held up my hand. "No. You may not be tired, but I am. Remember, I went all the way out there by myself and then came right back. I need at least 6 hours sleep and a nice comfortable bed before I'll be able to move again." The look she gave me made me feel every one of my 35 years, but I didn't intend to let her go roaming around at this stage of the game. Instead, I put her aboard one of the little rail cars and we headed for the Viking Arms, generally considered the best hotel on Ceres. Ceres has a pretty respectable G-pull for a planetoid, 3% of standard. I weigh a good hefty 5 pounds on the surface. That makes it a lot easier to walk around on Ceres than on, say, Raven's Rest. Even so, you always get the impression that one of the little rail cars that scoots along the corridors is climbing uphill all the way, because the acceleration is greater than any measly 30 centimeters per second squared. Jack didn't say another word until we reached the Viking, where Ravenhurst had thoughtfully made reservations for adjoining rooms. Then, after we'd registered, she said, "We could at least get something to eat." "That's not a bad idea. We can get something to line our stomachs anyway. Steak?" She beamed at me. Steak. Sounds wonderful after all those mushy concentrates. Let's go. End of section 2.